had a huge issue with that. And that goes to, it really goes to boundaries as well, like boundaries for yourself and boundaries for other people. But that idea, like I have to say yes to everything, is a big indicator of low self-esteem, but also of, huge aggrandizement of self.
So, yes, so it helped me when I heard the sort of codependent 101 is I'm a piece of shit in the center of the universe.
Right.
And I think that with self-esteem is something people talk about a lot. And this is something that nettles me quite a bit because maybe it's just my comedian brain.
Nettles
me.
I like
What?
No. I like that word. Go ahead.
Because it doesn't make me angry. It frustrates me when someone is so close to having the life they want, but there's just something that they are perseverating about or can't seem to, solve, which, to me, a big one is how do you develop self-esteem, and that's something that, I don't describe myself as someone that has or began my life with a tremendous amount of self-esteem, but I do have a tremendous amount of confidence. So sometimes that seems confusing to people. So when you look at someone who's really confident, it doesn't mean they have, good self-esteem
healthy
for themselves, healthy self-regard at all, because you could have developed that confidence because you're so insecure that you're such a piece of garbage that you had to, develop the ability to perform, the ability to contain a room, the ability to beguile people and distract people and, and brag about yourself and get good at something. So I had confidence for a long time. So I would conflate it with self-esteem because I'd be like, wait a second, how could I have low self-esteem? Like I'm, really aggressively, I'm the captain of my basketball team and I'm like, performing and I'm in acting classes and I'm doing monologues in front, like I'm clearly not shy, but in my personal life, there was this very corroded soul, a very low self-worth. And if we want to talk about why we can, but something I have learned is that in the amount of time you complain about having low self-esteem and the amount of time you complain about how low your self-worth is, you could have done something to build your own self-esteem or self-worth. It's about building your own self-esteem by engaging in esteemable actions. So if you've looked at 15 memes today about love yourself, self-worth, I think that there's like a big confusion about how it's actually
because it's a verb. It only shows up through taking action, and really those actions generally need to be on behalf of the self, so you can develop that unconditional level of healthy self-regard that isn't contingent upon how good of a performer you are, or you do it selflessly on behalf of another person. And through repetition of that type of behavior, where you get to a point where it's habitual, that's how you develop it over time. So I think the distinction between confidence and self-esteem lies in confidence can be, a limited, specific, skill-based thing. Like you have confidence as a performer, but how much of your, decision to invest yourself in being a performer is really compensating for your low self-esteem, so you can wear it like a mask and feel confident in that regard. But when your head hits the pillow at night, you're like, yeah, I did that thing, but like they probably could see through it, or they know that I'm not worth anything, or any of all of that starts to.
But that's not your voice. Whose voice is that? Mindset, right?
Yeah.
And it made me I was just so excited because I've been on this, uncovering like family ancestry stuff, what I inherited, what guilt and shame isn't mine, what paranoia isn't mine, what anxiety is mine and isn't mine, and what did I inherit that's actually secretly an incredible gift that made me a superhero that I should stop complaining about and just alchemize it into money or whatever. And I think that once I switched that mindset of I didn't get this, I only focus on what I did get, because the other one didn't work for me very well. It did when I entered into a 12-step program and started doing the steps and writing out, I remember in the amends chapter where you write all the people you owe amends to. So in AA, it usually looks something like, I stole this guy's car, I gotta apologize. I stole this guy's drugs, I have to apologize. I cheated on this girlfriend, I gotta go to apologize. Ours are, slightly different, our amends. Our amends are usually like, no one owes me any apologies. Here are the ones, I don't owe anyone apologies. Here's who I think owes me an apology.
Right.
That's how we go into it.
Well, alcoholics go into it with that mindset as well, the steps are a way of disabusing people of
Yeah.
that idea. Like,
And we abuse ourselves.
You're a victim. Like, I got wronged by all these people. And, you have to like go through the steps to understand and identify how you participated in all of those things that went wrong.
I got wronged by all these people, so I did the obvious thing and started to just wrong myself.
Right.
Codependency
is different because you're looking towards family ancestry, and when you're a child, obviously you don't have culpability for however you were treated.
Totally. And then the way that basically a couple things that I think might just be helpful in terms of like people saying, what is codependence? Because I think a lot of people think of it as like, oh, people who just spend a lot of time together, the guy and the girl who just like won't stop hanging out. It's usually defined a couple ways that really help me. Number one, the inability to tolerate the discomfort of others or perceived discomfort of others, right?
Check over
check,
there.
Check.
I never thought of myself as a codependent, but the more I learn about it, I was like, oh, I'm completely, diagnosable as this, but keep going.
Anyone who's not a psychopath has some level of codependence. And I think that one of the most powerful things that I did was really study history. That's a really cool thing if you want to sort of get in touch with your understanding of what your addictions are, whether it's gambling. As we know, gambling doesn't always have to be with actual chips and money, shoplifting, what's that? And alcoholism also, it took me a second to understand because I didn't see a lot of alcohol around me when I was a kid because it was all secret, it was furtive, it was in it was in a Diet Coke can, it was in a coffee cup, and that wasn't really my experience. I would see my mom drink glasses of wine. I just thought we were rich. I didn't understand what was happening. I just thought like, oh, at 8 o'clock, like you make dinner and pour a glass of wine and make sure she gets in bed okay. Like life was going fine, in a lot of ways, but a couple other things is that number one, in order for alcoholism to be present, alcohol doesn't have to be present. So alcoholism is, defined by any, engaging in something despite negative consequences, right? Whether it's over-organizing, cheating, sex addiction, love addiction, obsession with things being clean and presence. There was a lot in my home, a lot of neuroses about gifts for other people. We're going to a party. You have to bring a gift. What can we wrap up from around the house? We can't use that tissue paper. I'm in recovery because I gave you a gift today with no tissue paper. That is codependent recovery.
But I see the healthy aspect of that is like you didn't have to be perfect about it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I thought that was perfect.
Right. It was perfect.
See?
Yeah.
I was like perfectly authentic in what it was because the old way that my stinking thinking would be is to be like, I have to stop by the papyrus and store and he likes to run and be outside. So let me get him a card with a runner on it. And then I'm going to get the tissue paper, the green to match his chair. Like I was just, for what?
Insanity.
Because I didn't think I was enough. I had to lead with something of value because that's how little value I thought I had.
Right. Because you just showing up without any of that would be inadequate.
Or, let's get even darker. I wanted you to like me. I wanted you to think I was a nice person. And I was trying to manipulate one of the smartest people that I look up to. So a lot of it's that.
That was manipulative, though.
Yes, totally. Can you just give me that back so that
I'll take it.
That it's not.
Thank you. But,
so that's the other thing about, codependence is that there's a little bit of a like, those people just seem like depressed, whiny, boring nerds and, whatever. So all the stuff that alcoholics do, I mean, again, let's just say with substances or people in narcotics, whatever, and they share and they're like, I got in this car crash because I was drunk driving, or I climbed into my girlfriend's window because I did meth and I thought she was cheating and then I fell off and I got arrested, whatever. And then Al-Anon's and codependents sit in the back of the room of like a double winners and we're like, we do that sober.
Right.
Like we do all the same insane behaviors.
You can't get an out or point to the substance as the excuse.
Well, for us, it's the internal drug cabinet. It's the adrenaline, the cortisol, and the hit that we get from chaos. So some of it, of course, is going to be epigenetic imprinting in utero. Whatever chemicals that your mother was emitting in utero was getting you addicted to those chemicals, the same way you would be addicted to opioids in Appalachia if you were, in the tummy of a mother that was taking opiates. Thanks, Purdue. I have umbrella insurance, so I can say that. Do you have personal liability insurance?
I don't know.
You might want to get it if you have me on your show.
Yeah.
And then the other way, what was I? I just got...
Just all the different ways that codependency shows up through neurochemically.
So
and
epigenetically. So epigenetically, you can come out of the womb addicted to chaos and drama, like right out of the gate, as if you were a crack baby. You know, mom was addicted to crack, whatever it is. So even as a child, I was like subconsciously always like trying to get on the moving escalator. I was just always trying to like getting in the knives, like whatever I could. To get that adrenaline, because adrenaline turns into dopamine. So a lot of us don't even understand how addicted to adrenaline we are, and how we put ourselves in situations that's going to get us that hit, whether it's that toxic relationship, that job we hate. It might even be being a fan of a football team that sometimes wins, sometimes doesn't. I love them because sometimes I'll be mad and sometimes I'll be happy, but like at least I know I'm going to get that hit of adrenaline.
You feel alive.
You feel alive.
And that's the big thing when you get sober. You just think your life, because you're gonna crunch that curve down, and you're not gonna have the high highs and the low lows. So you just think, well, life's gonna suck, and it really, basically is like a mirror for how much we're captured by those swings.
And this also might be something that was a train that left the station 200 years ago, and it really behooved your ancestors to behave like this. And now it just doesn't behoove you. So now you just have a bunch of tools in your toolbox that you're using. And I think it's just about updating your software. It's just about going from, 1.0 to 2.0. Oh, I don't need these tools anymore. Wait, actually, even though I developed this tool to calm down my mom who was screaming, for example, like that worked really well. It doesn't work, but it might work well for this other thing if I just tweak it. Like, I think that when we look back at our child and they're like, oh, that was trash, that was a nightmare, it broke me. I believe that anyone that's grown up in, adversity, dysfunction, I maybe towards the end of the podcast can make my case of people that were raised in, quote, perfect homes are the craziest people I know. But
we'll put a pin on that to come back to it.
Well, here's the thing. All my friends that grew up in these homes that I was so jealous of when I was a kid, I was like, this is like Mayberry. It's like their mom is here, their dad is here. They have like picnic blankets and stuff. 40 years later, they're like, oh, my dad had a secret wife in Pensacola. And I'm like, I told you there was a catch.
More often than not, yeah.
Or you get this other form of, quote, let's say trauma. I know it's a very trendy word right now, but that you saw a, quote, perfect couple that loved each other. And then so now you can't pair bond with other people because you're comparing it to the parents that you saw. It was super copacetic. So I do see a lot of people who are just like, I don't know, I want what my parents have. It's like, that's not possible anymore. That was possible before phones and computers and Facebook.
Yeah. But this idea of really getting a broader picture of your heritage, like back to the long path idea, is a much healthier way of thinking about your parents. I mean, it's just, you got to let go of the resentment, right? Like you have to forgive. You have to, sort of step into a sensibility of grace with that. And, that's the kind of building block to what you just described, which is like regarding them as, doing the best they can and giving you these superpowers that you have, and understanding that they were playing out narratives and behavior patterns that they inherited, and they were trying to do the best that they can. And it allows you to just kind of breathe a little bit easier about the whole thing, rather than just grinding on a resentment over and over and over again, and then perpetuating the same unhealthy behavior pattern time and time again.
And I think a lot of people don't understand. It took me a minute too, because it was like, didn't really compute that when you have a resentment against someone else, it's like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die.
You're harming yourself.
You're harming yourself. It's actually selfish to forgive people. And the reason we forgive people, but he owes me this, but he did. We forgive others not because they deserve forgiveness, but because we deserve peace. And also, I think that when we don't forgive our parents, forget molestation and, actual crimes that were committed, but just this like, I grew up in a way and I was never taught about this, and I never got love from my dad and this and that. Like, if you're not forgiving your parents, I think at this point, you're a bully. I have such a strong, because I used to really revolve my life around my bad childhood. It was my thing. It was my brand. I could trauma bond with people. I was able to kind of control people because they felt bad for me. I was able to blame that when I was making irresponsible, selfish, childish choices. And when I realized, like, you really got to call yourself out. You got to tell on yourself. And what I do in my program is a lot of like checking your motives. There's an exercise that an organization does, not Scientology, but it's sort of like a kind of a 12-step like boot camp thing that asks everybody in the audience on their first group meeting. They say, like, how many of you are mad at your parents? And everybody raises their hand.
Right.
And then they go, what if I told you that your parents' only job was to keep you alive? How'd they do? And everyone's like, maybe that's too extreme, but it is just a different way to change your perception. So it's like, in Al-Anon, Coda, the same thing of it is a disease of perception, right? I have a disease where I see things in a way that really helped me stay calm as a child. My dad didn't come home. Well, I'm an ugly, stupid idiot. And I got to be in my report card. Of course he's going to come home. That worked for me at the time. So because if we say, oh, well, my dad, just doesn't, is irresponsible, a child can't handle that.
Sure.
So you have to blame yourself because it's kind of an easy, you can control it. Well, that was my fault. So if I just achieve more next time, he will come home. And and it's not true. It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Insanity 101, but there's a point where I think I realized that the more responsibility I took for my own bad choices, tricky thoughts, judgmental thoughts, instinct to gossip, just loving it, the more miserable my life was. Like when I decided on this radical accountability, zero blame, my life got so much better. And if you really study, if you're mad at your parents, you just don't know enough about history. Study the region they came from, study their ancestors, study where they came from, study all of this, it's like, and also look at your phobias. When you see people that are histrionic about worms or snakes or bugs or stuff like that, I'm kind of just like, something happened.
Sure.
You got that somewhere, whether it was your great grandfather fell off a cliff, your family's clumsy and you should know this,
The more that I steep myself in all of this, these worlds, the more clear it is that almost everything tracks back to childhood trauma. Like I had this guy, Paul Conti, in here recently. That episode hasn't gone up yet, but you would love this guy. He's like this, world leading expert on trauma, or like Gabor Mate, like all of these things, like what gets imprinted on you at a very early age becomes the dictator of basically all of your, strengths and weaknesses. And then developing an understanding of that to untangle the behavior patterns that no longer serve you becomes like this life work, that a lot of people never stumble upon because they never reach a pain point or an inflection point that is dramatic enough to get them to shift. So I think a lot of people are just operating, in a low grade level of semi-unawareness that's driving so many of the behavior patterns that are leading their lives astray or preventing them from kind of, optimizing who they are.
And then I also, I completely agree. And I also see a little bit of this self-obsession with people's trauma where it's like, I just want to talk about it and re-embed it.
Well, it becomes an identity and that's its own victimhood.
And I want this to define me. I want everyone to know about it. I want to be viewed by the world as a victim because then I can control people. It's a way, it's a survival mechanism to stay safe. But for me, about 5-6 years ago, I stopped being overly sharing, with the stuff that happened to me because I would go, and then this happened, and people go, oh no. And then you get feedback from what is entertaining to other people or engaging about other people or makes them, in your mind, like you more. So I find myself, really resisting sharing about that all the time because I also think there's a matter of once you solve a problem, you can solve things privately and then you can do living amends. You don't have to tell everyone about everything all the time. It's a way to ensure that in the future you're going to.
Or just making sure that when you're sharing about it, it's more about solution than the drama of the facts of the experience.
Are you just sharing it with strangers?
Right.
Or are you being of service to other people who you talking about it to them will help them?
Yeah, but it is empowering to talk about these things and give voice to it, which is, that's one of the main reasons I wanted to have you here because you're so open about this. And I think it gives, people who are watching or listening permission to be a little bit more reflective about their own histories and maybe realize there's something there that they weren't looking at and that it's okay to explore that and hopefully at some point heal it.
And have an understanding. For me, there's some neurological hygiene, I think, that also has been really helpful to me of, treating what you consume mentally the same way you treat what you consume food-wise. There's certain things that I know, like if I watch this, then it's going to kick, like I know how this ends. And really the miracle of doing the 12-step program work is about being able to make choices only that are a positive contribution to your future self. And the idea is every day I'm like playing defense on future shame, because happiness is not a word that I just use. It doesn't work for me. It puts too much pressure on me. It's too vague. But I know that when I go to bed, when I'm doing my 10 step, if I feel pride in the way I behaved all day, I feel good. That's what happiness is to me, is pride. So I will engage in behavior and go like, am I going to be proud of this in 2 days? Am I going to be proud of this text? Am I going to be proud of the way I behaved? And that's sort of my life hack of what I found that works.
But then do you find yourself rewarding yourself for that by then indulging in something maybe you might not be proud of? Like I'm going to binge this terrible show or what, like just, I'm talking about like relatively benign things, but stuff that, like, as they say, the road gets narrower, right? So it's like, well, I can't keep doing that thing anymore. Or like I gave up all these other things. Like, do I really have to give up this thing too? Come on, like, let me have a little bit of fun over here.
Yeah, no, I mean, that I do somewhat. I really have my, I have a pretty like rigid yet wildly flexible sort of schedule of things that I do to make sure that my internal needs are met. Because one of the first things I heard was happiness is an inside job, which was mind-blowing to me, that it wasn't everyone's job in the room to make sure I was okay at all times. Even though I'm such a people pleaser, I was trying to make sure, you okay? Do you need anything? Like your waitress, wherever you go, but you're not really, can I help you clean up? You don't really want to clean up. Is that a real offer, or are you just trying to make people like you?
Yeah.
What is this performance? And I think that, codependents, if I could just jump back a little, be super specific. Codependents are, people who define themselves through their ability to be productive for others or useful to others. We basically grew up in a situation where we had to be precocious, probably very young. It's usually the second child, third, fourth, fifth, someone that had to raise themselves, someone had to be, too mature too early. So then they have an overdeveloped responsibility as adults to other people. So a lot of it is like, before you solve the problem, first make sure it's your problem. That's a tricky one, and then you look at your motives for whatever you're doing. I'm going to this bachelor party. Do I really want to go to this? Am I doing this out of obligation? If I'm doing this out of obligation, that's gross to do to the other person. Because anyone that is truly a friend of mine, we have an authentic, actual, intimate connection, as friends, I'm lying. My behavior is showing up and lying. And we really focus not on what we say, it's about the choices we make and the behavior we make. So I would never want someone that I'm friends with to come to something out of obligation and be like, oh my God, why am I going to that? Like, I would never want that. That would, so that's gross. And that's all between you and your, spirit, because I think that's what slowly breaks our spirit when we force ourselves to do things that we don't want to do, because we assume that those people, we project onto them, you're going to be as punishing as this person. You're going to be as mean as this person. You're going to keep score like this other person. It has nothing to do with that person.
Right. And your worldview is that everything is conditional in your life.
Everything
is teetering on disaster at all times unless you like sort of do that right behavior.
But that's us, and it's your job to heal yourself. I know that is as soon as I started thinking that way, and as soon as I started saying like, why doesn't someone just invent a time machine to change my childhood? Like, what did I think was going to happen? I think you get to a point where you're like, I've tried all these things. Blame just doesn't work. Obsession doesn't work. Silently seething doesn't work. Complaining all day doesn't work. Let me just try this whole, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change, and the wisdom to know the difference. So there's a lot of things I have power over. But I remember early on in a meeting, a woman talked about how when she's not clear on what is and isn't her responsibility, because codependents, we tend to be the people that are like, what do you need? I need a doctor. Let's call Whitney. Oh, who's that dentist? Call. I love to be useful, want to entrench myself in your life, because ultimately you'll abandon me. So I have to find ways to put my hooks in you, and being helpful and useful. It's like, I've got your insulin. Where are you going to go? Is kind of, all of it is fear of being abandoned. And it all came with a scorecard. I dropped off flowers for your wife, and then I brought you this thing for your kids. You didn't ask for any of that. And then my birthday comes up and Rich doesn't come. I dropped off.
You're the only one keeping score though.
But yeah, 100%. And then I'm destroying my relationship with you because I did a bunch of nice. People pleasing is a form of assholery. The nice thing that I did had strings attached, you know. But today I had no, you know, because I didn't pay for it or buy it for you. I don't. I did the least, you know, and that's sometimes how you keep a relationship strong and your connection to yourself, because you're also betraying yourself. You're lying to yourself and you're performing. And I found that I got to a point in my life where someone asked me, a sponsor I was working with said, when you look in the mirror, do you look in your eyes? And I was like, such a weird ass LA Scientology. What is it? Like, am I getting a pamphlet? Like, and I realized I look in the mirror and never, because I was so disconnected to myself because I was betraying myself, you know, all day long. And lying to other people, myself, with my actions, my behaviors, guilt-based decisions, mothering, martyring, micromanaging, which those are the 3 M's, which is, you know, it could be fathering, micromanaging, martyring, whatever it is. It's just basically you're constantly trying to rescue people, help people, fix people, solve problems that aren't yours with your overdeveloped sense of responsibility. And I remember I just was like, yeah, I'm everyone's assistant, or it's my job to fix everyone, save everyone, which is part of the reason that Al-Anon's, you know, whereas an alcoholic might be addicted to alcohol, an Al-Anon might be addicted to the chaos created by that alcohol.
I feel like we need new terminology, because when you say alcoholism, you immediately think of alcohol. You said earlier, like, you don't need alcohol present for alcoholic behavior. But to your point, like, it's not about alcohol. Like, it needs a new term. I mean, maybe just addiction in general, right? And like Al-Anon and codependency is generally thought of in this reductive sense of enabling alcoholic behavior.
Which is essentially when something stops being a choice, right? Like that's a definition that really works for me, whether it's you're masturbating at work in the bathroom or you're working on your computer till 1 a.m. and then it's 2 and or whatever, your behaviors, any of them, when it stops being a choice, is defined as an addiction. I think I'm just a little bit sensitive to, I would love to know what you think, because the addiction to the phone, the addiction to the Snapchat, all this stuff, that's alcoholism, you know, on some level, but it is masquerading as something else. And then once you get, it's whack-a-mole, right? Once you get the drinking under control, the eating comes up. Once the eating comes up, the sex comes up. Once the sex goes down, the porn comes up, whatever. Addict just, I guess, has been used for so long as a negative term. And I believe that addicts have superpowers that a lot of people don't, and are usually hypervigilant, just very smart. You can't get away with your alcoholic behavior if you're not wildly smart. You know,
you have to be crafty and cagey to perpetuate that behavior over a long period of time. But I think that there's, it's certainly not a referendum on intelligence. Like it applies equally to everybody, no matter how you were brought up or who you are. And my whole thing with addiction is that it lives on this massive spectrum. So we think of it as alcoholism or drug addiction or gambling. We have these little buckets for it. But I think, you know, movies like The Social Dilemma and the relationship the sort of fraught relationship that we all have with our phones now is making people realize, like, oh, we're all captive on some level, and we all sit somewhere along this spectrum. And maybe it doesn't interfere with your life that much for a certain sector of the population, and then way over here, you know, you're living on Skid Row and you can't, you know, like it's, but I think a lot of us sit somewhere, you know, in the middle. And, you know, whether it's, I can't put my phone down, I can't stop scrolling, or, you know, as soon as I get activated by a text or an email, I have to respond immediately, or I keep dating the same kind of person and having the same kind of result. Like all of these things are, you know, alcoholic / addictive behaviors. And the more that we can become self-aware of what's driving us and where it's leading us, I think we're in a better position to, you know, heal those wounds and find better strategies for life. So it's really it's a very, you know, universal condition, I think. And that's kind of the drum that I'm always banging with this.
And maybe it's just me because I've spent so much time in with family members in rehab and sponsoring people and stuff. And maybe this is just the people that decide to go to the meetings and reach out, you know, and I'm always like, I always start with, this person might just be too damn smart to get this, which sounds crazy.
Intelligence does not serve you in recovery.
And most of the addicts, if we're going to say that for now, I say superheroes, are whenever I meet them, I'm like, oh, you were just smarter than everyone. That's why you didn't feel understood. You're just more sensitive than ever. You just have all these superpowers and you wanted to dull yourself. You wanted to check out of your own brain, is usually. So when I'm working with someone new, a sponsor or something, it's almost like you've been overdeveloped with, certain things. And some people just, the way that I think it was Margaret Cho was just on my podcast and I was reading about her when she went into rehab, she said something so perfect that made me just fall in love and relate to anyone that's ever used substances to dull their brains. She's like, I just didn't want to care anymore. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to stop caring for like a day, mm-hmm. I just wanted to stop caring about what people thought about me.
Well, that's where the addictive behavior is the solution to the problem. It's not the problem. It's the solution, and it works, or we wouldn't do it. But mm-hmm. then at some point it stops working, right? And we keep doing it. That's the problem.
So in relationships, whether it's drug addiction or codependence or Al-Anon, it's tricky because, your problem is you and the fact that you gravitated towards this, situation and found it to, mm-hmm. you thought this person was your soulmate because they were giving you all this chaos and drama, or this person is such a mess in their life that it makes me feel superior, even though I'm just mm-hmm. less of a mess than the person in active addiction,
right.
So it gives you this arrogance of he doesn't even know his AT. Oh, now I have to go learn Spanish to talk to the drug dealers. Okay, I guess I'm just a hero, angel.
Right, and that's what you needed to, kind of salve that wound that you have inside yourself.
I just got high off self-righteous indignation. Yeah. Thank you, person in active addiction. Mm-hmm. I just used you to get my hit.
Right.
So it's just this really toxic, surreptitious. Al-Anon is very insidious because a lot of it masquerades as kindness. When I was in the throes of my codependent behavior, if someone asks you, what's Whitney like? They would say, she's the nicest. She drives everyone to the airport. She doesn't even know. You would go, that sounds sick. But it's pathological kindness, we could like to say, pathological thoughtfulness as a way to let you know how thoughtful I am.
Right. Prophets walk among us. As a writer and podcaster for nearly 10 years, I've become more convinced than ever that our world is populated by scores of beautiful and brilliant people who have amazing stories to share. Those that we don't know, who can teach us something new and leave us all the better for the experience of their sharing. And so I've dedicated my career to tracking down the most compelling prophets on the planet, going deep with each of them on my podcast to elucidate the best of what they have to offer and to sharing the insights gleaned for the benefit of all. But the podcast is not the only medium by which to share their stories, which is why I'm proud to announce the release of my new book, Voicing Change Volume 2. More than mere words on paper, Voicing Change is a physical manifestation of the magic, inspiration, and timeless wisdom that transpires each week on the Rich Roll podcast. The first edition of Voicing Change was a beautifully rendered book worthy of display on any coffee table. And Volume 2 follows in that tradition by showcasing even more of my favorite conversations in an elegant publication replete with interview excerpts, essays, and stunning photography, making for an exquisite companion to the first volume or a satisfying standalone work. Picking up this book allows you to revisit the wisdom of your favorite everyday prophets and physically interact with the life-changing ideas contained within. Voicing Change Volume 2, available now while supplies last for a limited time. Order your copy today only at richroll.com. So what was your breaking point with all of this? How did you get ushered into the rooms?
I had a family member go into rehab because also the wild thing, probably very similar to work addiction, is that codependence is incredibly rewarded. It is incredibly rewarded. You are so useful. I played sports really competitively. I was always the first person to get there, the last person to leave.
Hello.
Yeah, totally. Just mostly because you guys organized this wrong.
Yeah.
We think we're right about everything because I
had an alcoholic coach who was less reliable to make it to morning swim practice, so I had the keys to the pool.
And that is a form of trauma that most people wouldn't categorized under trauma, but it was like,
And I was proud. I was like, yeah, I'm reliable. I will be there. I will make sure that everybody gets in. We're going to have morning swim practice.
Which goes, oh, the authority figure isn't reliable. I'm on my own, you know? So as soon as...
And that drives the control issues and the perfectionism.
Because you have great data that you should have the keys. You know, that's the tricky part, is when someone's like, you're mothering, you're micromanaging. Well, you guys suck at this. I like, there's also a tricky one, because it's like, well, I am better at this than you are. Maybe not for the right reasons, but I am, you know? So then you get to a point where you just go, it's not about that, you know? And then when you're leading 200 people, there's no time to act like that. And it turns out when you think that you're helping someone or helping them save time, you're just patronizing them, and you're like telling them, I don't trust that you can do this, so I'm gonna do it myself. But the guys is, oh, you know, I'll do it for you. Oh, I got it. No, I got it. No worries, you go home. But you're really just saying, I don't like the way you do things. I'll just martyr myself and do it, and then start to hate you and not even give you a chance, frankly. You know, because we were proven wrong as a kid. It was very hard to trust other people to do things. I had a really brutal a family member of mine went into rehab, and I was, you know, there 24/7, did the intervention, bring in the Nutri-Grain bars, bring in the, you know, athletic greens, you know, just there every single day. What do you need? Can I get you a sweatshirt? Do you need new shoes? Do you need comforter? I mean, I was just there all day, every day, while I was doing 2 television shows simultaneously. And someone pulled me aside, my now therapist, who is the family therapist there. She specializes in neuroscience of addiction, childhood trauma, et cetera, et cetera. And she's 30 years sober. She's amazing. And she came up to me and she was just like, hey, so, you know, you're just killing this person faster. And I was like, yeah, no, but, and of course I had guilt about what happened to both of us as kids, you know, what happened to her. And I just wanted to fix it with my love. And that's not how neurology works. That's not how.
Younger than you?
Older.
Older. Interesting.
You know, and so we both have sexual abuse in our past, which is once you really get a handle on that, a lot of behavior starts to make sense. And you start to go, oh, wait a second. All these things I do, I could actually kind of like reroute to be incredible tools to give me a giant advantage. Like, I actually think I have a giant advantage because of all these things. Like, let me just perceive it that way. You know, so for the longest time, I perceived my trauma as exactly what it was. The trauma I didn't block out, which we can talk about later, or repress or completely disassociate from. But I perceived it as trauma and as a liability. And I have 2 broken legs and a broken brain. And then as soon as I changed my perception on it, I was like, oh my God, I was like gifted all these wild superpowers. I'm just using them wrong. You know, so once I was able to do that, my life got pretty awesome, but it took, you know, 14 years in Al-Anon and still sponsoring and still super involved.
So when that therapist was like, you're killing yourself, or you're actually killing this person that you love more quickly.
Because you're not giving them the dignity of their own experience, and they can't grow if you do everything for them.
Well, and you're slowly killing yourself trying to solve a problem that's not your problem to solve, right?
Correct.
But when that lands like a ton of bricks, like, does that ring a bell in you and say, I need to go to Al-Anon? Or like, how did you like walk into your first meeting?
Well, because then the first thing I did was I went to the person. I was like, am I killing you? Like, is this bad? Should I not give you $100 every day for whatever you need for groceries? And
well, yeah, but you're asking the unreliable narrator. Like, of course they're going to say, keep doing that.
Does the drug addict need cash in rehab? So I did the, you know, cardinal mistake, which I went back to the person and I was like, I just talked to her and she thinks it's fine when I'm doing like, and she was like, okay, so.
That's hilarious.
I'm like, I'm a hero and I don't think you understand. Okay. Like I'm handling this. I've got it. And, she said to me, she goes, you know, there's a program, that, you know, is worth going to. I'd love to take you some time. And, you know, I was like, why? Why would I need a program? She's the one that won't stop drinking. We come from the same household, cut from the same cloth. Had the birth order been reversed, it would have just, you know. And she goes, well, I just watched you go to the problem for the solution. And I was like, yeah, that's how you get a solution. Like, I was like, you sober people are just, you don't get it. You know what I mean? I'm a very busy person. So her whole thing was like, no, if your problem is someone else's behavior, you go to a program for the solution, because the solution might be do nothing. The solution might be do not a damn thing, because we're so addicted to taking an action.
But that doesn't compute.
Does not compute. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to go to this meeting so I can figure out how to get her sober.
Well, that's the equivalent of like, I'm going to go to AA so I can figure out how to continue to drink without being an alcoholic.
It's totally ridiculous. And so, no, or people that are like, I shoplift bad, but I'm just going to the gambling 12-step programs because basically it's gambling addiction at the base of it. It's like, well, you're not, okay. But yes, the lies we tell ourselves and the delusions. And look, I had a ton of proof that I was a super high function as a perfectionist, as a micromanager, and as a martyr. I had gotten a lot
Which makes it harder because the world is smiling upon you and you're being wildly rewarded for these unhealthy behavior patterns that you're blithely unaware at some point are really going to derail you at best and might actually kill you.
Sometimes we're hurting people and ourselves and we don't even know it because we're just zombies and it always worked for us before. And I went in to my first 12-step Al-Anon meeting. ACA, Adult Child of Alcoholics, is the focus, which basically means you grew up in a home with addiction, let's say, to anything. And I went in and I was so bored. I was like, these people, I now look back and I can say, oh my God, all these people actually had self-worth and self-care and that's why they were doing these things. But I was like, ugh, this guy's eating a salad. Like, why are you in pajamas? Like, I was just like, what is this? I was like, this is like a bunch of slobs complaining, you know? And then there were all the rules. And I was like, God, how dumb are these people that you have to sit through all these rules? Like, wait, can we just get to it? And then every time someone would speak where it didn't apply to me, I would just like tune out or like get on my phone.
Looking for the differences.
Totally. I was like, oh, no. If you guys aren't only talking about me, like it was just, and then I was like, okay, I get it. I did get it in that meeting because someone said people pleasing is a form of assholery. That clicked. And then the speaker that day opened with, I have good news and bad news. The good news is the war is over. The bad news is that you lost. So now it's just about picking up the pieces. Like, that's great news. The Damocles sword fell. Now let's just pick up the pieces, you know? And that to me was like, I know how to do that. Being in delusion about whether something is going well or bad, that is confusing to me because I can convince myself of anything. You know, I think that helps me as a comedian to be able to see both sides of everything and empathize with, you know, every facet of something. But I heard that and I was like, okay. And then I went to another meeting and also
that was enough to get you to go back.
Well, also, you know, it was hilarious. And there were these deep belly laughs that I had never experienced.
Or were you thinking, like, I can get some good material here?
It wasn't even that.
Like, it was in a very Hollywood way. Like, I'm gonna.
I love that people think I'm so Hollywood. I live right down the street from you.
No, but I know. But like, did you go, like, when I got sober, all the meetings I went to were
Sundowners?
Like of course. Like, I've been to all of those.
No, that's where I went to try and date musicians that were vulnerable.
Yeah, it's good for that, actually.
I'm aware.
Yeah. Melrose and Mansfield.
Yep.
Like, okay.
Log Cabin.
Sure.
Just gone now, I think.
That's where I got sober, and I was there every morning for years.
I must say, you know, thank God this podcast exists so people can hear this everywhere. But Southern California is an incredible place for recovery, truly.
I'm so grateful. Like, the community of people that I was able, I mean, I needed all new friends, right? And I was in a city where there were just tons of young, cool people who were sober and really into recovery and would, like, loved going to meetings. And it was unbelievable. Like, my first couple years of just going from meeting to meeting to meeting and meeting all of these amazing people who've become like my closest friends.
By the way, amazing people. People are always like, a meeting like in a church, abandoned church. I'm like, which a lot of people have God stuff, you know, of like, God, what's this? So I usually will go with people to their first meeting. So I'm like, the God thing, just don't worry about it. Like, it's just not, God just, all you need to believe in this is that you aren't God. Do you know what I'm saying? If you can say that you're not God and you can't change people's...
Don't forget about the word God altogether and, you know, use higher power or whatever you want and just think, well, this group of people has more power than me because they figured out something that, like, I have trouble figuring out.
And why are you looking so badly for an excuse to not do this?
That's the key.
Just look at that. Why, the God thing's weird. That's the thing that is your, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's sort of...
That's the main thing for most people that prevents them from walking through the door. And everybody has all of these preconceived ideas about what it is and what it isn't. And a lot of that is driven by media, what they've seen in movies and television, or some family member that wasn't able to get sober through the program or whatever, which is why I have, like, I mean, I'm interested in your perspective on this. Like, what is your relationship as a public person with respect to the tradition of anonymity and how you talk about this kind of stuff, because we've been talking about this for an hour, right?
Okay.
And like, I am always battling with that a little bit, because had I known what I discovered when I came into the meeting, I might have come in earlier. And I understand the importance of anonymity, and I would never divulge, the specifics of who was there or what was said, but I can still evangelize the benefits of it generally. And I think that is a net positive, although I'm never sure kind of where that line is, because I want to encourage people who are struggling to check it out, right? And to do that, you have to, sort of characterize it as something aspirational.
May I ask for a pen and a piece of paper?
Yeah.
Not just
Here.
something, because my brain is like, I'm actually listening to you. That doesn't happen a lot. And so I'm listening, and then I'm like, wait, what was that thing I was going to say? I love this question. I love this question, especially because I just felt myself getting a little defensive, which is, so obviously this is something I've been kind of grappling with in some way, even if I haven't talked about it much, because there is, in these programs, and Al-Anon, the idea is you always keep the person anonymous, always, 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 not only because it's no one's business who it is and doesn't matter, but also it could put the person that is in that program in a lot of danger. If you're not allowed to call and leave messages or voicemails on someone else's voicemail machine and be like, hey, is your alcoholic husband still beating you? Because they could hear that, and it could put the person in danger. So that is a lot of the anonymity stuff. Also, clearly in public, you don't want people to know anything you're doing in private. That's not fair. So I would never out someone else's anonymity. But I think for me personally, and I think that the leaders of the day need to make sure that things that leaders from 50 years ago decided was a great rule, that we just keep looking at them and go, is that still the case? Is that still the case? Because, we've got things like kids shooting up schools, and we've got a real mental illness crisis. Should we still keep this secret? Is it still, for me, I'm a little bit reckless, and I just don't lie. That's something that works for me. And I think that if anyone was struggling the way I was struggling, to not talk about this program, which is also free medicine in a country where there's just not any free medicine.
And let's, to be frank, it's kind of a fucking miracle that it exists and it thrives and it helps so many people, and it's free and it's full of people. Like, where else in the world can you walk into a room totally broken and have a community of people come to your aid and help you and not want anything in return? It's fucking amazing.
There's also nothing.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just say there's just nothing more healing in general. I encourage I'm not trying to tell everyone hey, you all qualify for this. It's a self-diagnosed disease, but we all come from this. We all come from, if you, again, read history books, we're 100 years behind us was prohibition. They had to outlaw alcohol in this country. I know there's, the real side of the story is so Black people probably couldn't vote as much. There's a lot of sketchy.
That's a different podcast.
That's a different podcast that I'm not going to weigh in on. But there's a lot of sketchy reasons that prohibition happened, obviously. But, alcoholism in this country and, in the countries we immigrated from were just I looked into my ancestry to try to solve some problems or unearth some sort of engines in me that I aren't relevant to my current life. And I have half my ancestors died of cirrhosis. This is not new, So I think that to not talk about this is you're not talking about history, you're not talking about science, you're not talking about epigenetics. There's just no way to try to be in the space in any capacity and not talk about it. And yes, it's a bunch of people who want to be more mature. It's a bunch of people that want to make right decisions. And I think that if you only look at the data from being on the internet, where everyone's an asshole and everyone wants to cancel everyone, you do need to make sure, if you're going to engage and consume that stuff online, what is your antidote to that, to make sure that you're seeing the world and human beings in a balanced way? I'm very lucky I have stand-up comedy because I get to go see 2,000 people in one room. They're all laughing at the same shit. No one knows what anyone voted. No one knows what team anyone roots for. I'm people are trying. These people laughed at these jokes and they left and they want to vote. None of them are you're punching down. Most people aren't like that. And I think that if you want to be mentally healthy today, you have to take active contrary actions to make sure that you're getting data from interactions from most people, not just the like 10,000 people online who are probably very mentally ill.
Yeah. I mean, I think the argument in terms of anonymity, I mean, the kind of actual language is we're anonymous at the level of press, radio, and film, right? That's kind of like in the literature.
Okay, you didn't put YouTube
so,
in there, Bill.
I know, but like, is this press? Is this, well, it's not technically radio, right?
Kind of.
So,
but
I guess you could make the argument, I mean, the idea being like, you don't like, promote this in the world. And part of that is if you're a public facing person and you do that and then you relapse, it reflects poorly on the community. And I think there's some, I understand that.
Look, Bill, the big book doesn't include phones, cell phones. It doesn't include computers. That was written before like porn and vapes and weed being legal. There's a couple things that need to be updated about it. And, I'm happy to be wrong, but I usually feel like I'm going in the right direction when I'm able to stop and check my motives and go, okay, am I talking about this to try to get attention? Am I talking about this to try to make people feel sorry for me? Am I trying to make people like me? Am I trying to make people think I'm smart? What am I trying to do? And then if I'm like, no, if I had this program when I was 20, a program to reparent myself, that's all it is. Our parents did the best they can with the tools they had. And then it's just college for how to behave in relationships, how to behave, how to treat yourself, how to treat other people. I got a bad blueprint for that. And it was no one's fault. I mean, my dad and mom worked a lot. They were really busy, because they had to work for money. I interpreted it as neglect,
right.
But they were trying to keep me fed. I was a perception issue. And so there's so many magic tricks in this program. There's also just some of the most incredible people I've ever met. Some of the most healing laughs I've ever had, because there is a levity within these programs. No one wants to have to do that 3 times a week, until then, once you start doing it, you really want to do it because you know how great it is. It's like exercise or anything. It's going to suck for the first couple weeks and then you'll get kind of addicted to it. And I think there's such a thing as positive addictions. If your brain is, doesn't hold dopamine the same way other people's hold dopamine, which is basically what ours is. There's biological basis for it, But then when you start getting addicted to meetings and hanging out with friends and cool people and taking calls from sponsees, you're like, wait, is this addictive the way you're like, no, this is a good thing. Like, this is a positive addiction.
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, I think that there's, on the subject of levity, like there's nothing more healing than to go into that environment harboring some deep shame or some secret about some terrible thing that you did and hear somebody share a similar analogous version of that story and just own it with laughter. It's just unbelievably liberating to realize like, oh, A, I'm not alone. And B, like there is hope to transcend this thing that I'm so deeply afraid of ever telling anybody that I did. And the fact that there's people around there who will, welcome you without judgment and walk you through the process of going from the newcomer to being the person up there sharing your story is just one of the coolest things I've ever participated in or been witness to.
And in addition, when someone is helping you, you're helping them. So you don't have to feel guilt that, this person's helping me. And,
That's the mind fuck that took me a long time to figure out. But yeah.
That's the mind fuck of codependence in general. Because normally codependence, I'm like, just call me every day.
Oh, you mean it's good for me to be of service to people? I can selfishly be of service because it will help me? That's probably not a great message for an Al-Anon.
Well, no, it's more that I'll go, okay, great. I'll sponsor you. Let's talk every morning for 10 minutes, talk every night for 10 minutes, send me this many voice memos a day. Anytime you do this or this, just check in with me about it. Let's make a scout, whatever. And it's a lot of well, I don't want to bother you. I just don't want to, I know you're busy. And I feel guilty calling twice a day. And I'm like, so this is the, mind fuck of codependence. So let's play that scene out. You're the codependent. You're a newcomer day one into Al-Anon. Rich, I'm your sponsor. I want you to call me twice a day, check in.
Yeah, what? I don't know. I don't want to bug you.
So
I don't know.
So
I'm busy.
You're busy?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if we stop before
if I have time.
It was this. But it's more like I don't want to bother you. So I said, call me. You said, I don't want to bother you. So now you're calling me a liar.
Mm.
You're saying that I just said something insincere.
Mm-hmm.
That's rude. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like when we really get to the bottom of codependent, I'm so worried about you. You're saying a couple things. Number one, that I'm bad at my own time management, that I say things that I don't mean, and that I'm trying to manipulate you. Like you doing that was insulting to me.
Right. Well, the other piece, at least from the alcoholic perspective in that context, would be, what's your angle, or what are you trying to get over on me, or you're trying to, like, there's a hitch here.
13
like,
stepping on you.
I'm waiting for, to find out, like, oh, you're actually trying to run a scam on me.
What I would say is good news, bad news. The shoe dropped. I'm not going to fuck you over. You already fucked yourself over enough. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, what would I fuck you over for?
Well,
your
like,
3 DUIs?
You don't have anything that I want,
yeah, exactly.
dude. That's the thing.
Why would I? What do I get? Your studio apartment with the
grandiosity of the newcomer, right?
And then also you can get information so I think a lot of what this is about is just like slowing down the way that we talk and getting super granular with what your reaction is to something. So if I say to I sponsor, female identifying people. I say, call me anytime. She says, I can't, I feel guilty. And I go, that's great information that people were insincere with you growing up, or they said one thing and meant another thing, or there were strings attached, or they overpromised and underdelivered, or they offered something and then made you feel guilt when you actually took it.
Right. Or they made you believe that their time was more valuable than yours.
So let's start writing that up in your 4-step.
Mm-hmm.
It is, what is the 4-step story about how, because I think the key to all this is also knowing whether you do one meeting or do them all the time, like I do, you on some level believe that you're terminally unique, right? If you're like, I don't want to tell anyone that bad thing I did, like, oh, you're the only person that stole a car. You think what you did was there's an arrogance to what I did was so bad. And then you get someone read your 4-step, which is you admitting all the crazy shit you've done, and you're there's a story that's like, yeah, and then I fucked this chicken. He's like, wasn't there a whole coop? You only fuck one of them? Yeah. It just was sort of like we've all done that, and I think it was Barry Michaels, and who is the other therapist that wrote The Tools? Phil Stutz. He talks about, he said it so elegantly.
Phil Stutz, he was the big therapist, psychologist guy in Hollywood, right?
Yeah. Being a Hollywood psychologist.
He was the guy that everyone wanted to get with, though, right?
Yeah, he's like very hard to
Is he still around?
Him and Phil Stutz, him and Barry Michaels, who is sort of his protege, wrote that book called The Tools, which I highly recommend. There's some like antidotes that I think your fan base would just find a little bit, too simple for them. It's sort of, they already know it. But there's some exercises that are incredible that they put together. The deathbed exercise, where you picture yourself on your deathbed, like very vividly. It actually really helps put things in perspective. Right.
The idea, like, being that when you're going through a problem or you're having some kind of experience, fast forward to the deathbed and then then reflect on whatever you're going through right now is just really important.
I struggled with eating disorders for a very long time. I had a really profound experience when I was like, oh my God, I would be so bummed if on my deathbed I looked back and was like, you spent like years of your life like counting calories and like driving around the city buying sugar-free protein bar. Like, I just was like, my future, I'm not gonna let that happen to my future self. Like, I will not go down like that, and it just, something clicked. But when you're doing the work and you're asking for, illuminating of your psyche and your inner monologue, I think that when something really simple hits you, it really can make a change in your brain real fast.
Yeah. So control issues, people pleasing, boundaries, disordered eating, codependency, like, it's a whole bag of tricks here. So, and you've done like so much work, right? So like, but like, I'm interested in like, on that idea of like the road is always getting narrower, like you never transcend all of this. So what's the thing that's coming up now? Like,
I love
what
that.
Is the thing that you're doing battle with?
And can I just say really quick, just in terms of, because what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness. And I think that it might be worth saying, like, in these programs, you say admitted to God or power greater than yourself, that you are powerless over blank, powerless over alcohol, powerless over cocaine, powerless over sex, powerless over porn, powerless over whatever the thing is that you're powerless over, where it's no longer a choice. And in Al-Anon, for me, it changed. Like in the beginning, it started with I was powerless over other people's behavior. I would obsess over other people's behavior. I would try to, why did he do that? Why did he say that? He doesn't like me? Wait, hold on. Does he like, wait, should I have said that? I shouldn't have said that. I mean, just constant. And then I'm powerless over other people's perceptions of me. Then I was powerless over perfectionism. Then I was powerless over worrying and panic. Like worrying gave me a high. I think that an addiction to anxiety and panic is super real. An addiction to chaos. I'm powerless over chaos. I love chaos, but it's all a choice. I'm the one getting in the car and driving to his house.
Yeah.
I'm the one that drove over. I'm the one that drove to that Thanksgiving with my dad and his new wife. I'm the one doing that.
So did you have a bunch of boyfriends that were just chaos agents that would fill that need?
It's wild because I've been very lucky. I believe that in your 20s, if you're in a bad, or whatever that means, that's normal. What you do in your 20s, experimentation, figuring things out, we need contrast. You got to be in a couple bad relationships. So when the right person comes along, you're actually going to be grateful and not be like, Raya, maybe there's more, So there are some that were just more childish than anything. But actually because I was so precocious, I was actually able to do relationships pretty well with some healthy people until I started being successful in terms of my, it took having the whole day free to be able to maintain those relationships, which is a red flag, because I used to think that proximity and intimacy went hand in hand.
Yeah.
So when I was able to do, it was dysfunctional at the time. If he went out of town, I'd like, what are you doing? I'll come with you, whatever. So afraid of being cheated on, abandoned, left, whatever. And then I dated a couple addicts, we're saying, in active addiction. And there was one that was so bad, I was, hiding crack pipes and driving downtown and fighting with drug dealers and that whole thing. Oof. And I really thought I was helping this person. I really thought I could, if someone just loved him enough, he would be sober. That shows my lack of understanding of basic neuroscience, basic biology, So one of the first things they say to do when you come into Al-Anon is study addiction. Learn about it. There's that book, Addicts and Addictive Thinking, I think. Study alcoholism. Study what happens to the brain, because you're going to take their behavior personally and it has nothing to do with you. Yeah. So that relapse had nothing to do with you. In fact, you probably be like, where's the crack pipe? Is there anything? Who just called you? I mean, like, no one, that's not going to help someone tolerate, life without being anesthetized, if that's been their choice so far. And then, I believe you've mentioned this before, a rule that kind of helped me, whatever it is, aphorism, is that you are the age you are minus the amount of time you've been using drugs. So I was also in relationships with people that had, even if they were sober, they had been doing drugs since they were 14, now they're 30, and just emotionally, haven't developed their coping mechanisms yet. They haven't had an opportunity to have the dignity of their own experience. Like, they're still catching up emotionally, and I was expecting them to run with a broken leg. I was expecting them to be in a relationship with the emotional intelligence of a 14-year-old.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's a big one, I think. People have this assumption that when somebody gets sober and then maybe they have a year or something like that, like, oh, they're fine. Like, everything's fine. They're back to, being who they are. But they don't understand that, they have to learn how to be in the world. Like, I couldn't tell you how many years it took for me to learn how to say no to like anything. Like, I had no ability to
tell me about that.
Be an adult, meaning
would you feel like they'd be mad at you?
Sure. Yeah. But that showed up for me mostly as avoidance. Like, I'll respond to that email later, or I'll just pretend I didn't get that text where they asked me that question. And then you get in those situations where time passes and then the phone weighs 1,000,000 pounds.
Which is so unfair to you.
I do that. I used to do that all the time. I still, I'm challenged by that.
Because to me, if I send you a text saying, hey, Rich, you want to come to my birthday? And you're like, let me just not. I like you so much. Like, it'd be my nightmare if I stressed you out with that, but I would never think that it would be that much of a challenge for you, So it's sort of like we are, it's on us to develop the coping mechanisms to be able to go, okay, I've got this. This is the tool I used, which is like I have in my voice notes, in my notes app, I do a lot of voice memoing for my 10th step and stuff to like listen back and see if I'm full of shit sometimes. But I have like 3 go-to sayings for when someone asks me to do something, you know? Hey, so good to hear from you. I am at capacity right now and I can't commit to anything at the moment. Can I let you know in a couple weeks? Or, hey, can you actually send this with someone on that's my scheduler so they can send to a fake email, whatever it is. Hey, I just can't commit right now. Here's what. If anyone is unhappy with that response, they're not integrated.
Sure.
And then the sooner we start, say what you mean what you say, don't say it mean, instead of, oh, hey, you just invited me, it's next week. And if you don't put that shit on them, it's a great opportunity for both of you to practice maturity and to see as you evolve in your program and start reparenting yourself to be mature in your expectations of other people and not try to put your hooks in everyone, you get to see who they are. Mm-hmm. And then you also get to get proof that, number one, no one cares if you say no.
Right.
And no one cares when you cancel. You're doing them the biggest favor. Mm-hmm. You know?
The other unhealthy response, is the multiple paragraph one where you tell some long story about like what you can't do.
So in my first 6 months, no emails longer than 2 sentences. Any email that is more than 3 sentences, you are either trying to manipulate, you're apologizing, you're trying to micromanage how they perceive you, you're trying to guilt them or shame them. Do they deserve, same thing. And then I sent you that text today. I tried to be very succinct, but I had to go, no, he does not need to know that. That's me trying to make him think I'm not an asshole, And then I'm going, that makes me go, oh, this guy has no ability to judge me when he meets me, or if he thinks I'm an asshole based on that one extra sentence, there's probably something off with him.
Right.
But to really...
But it takes that recovery and that maturity to have that thought occur to you.
Maturity is such a crazy word because I think we associate it with being kids, but as an ACA, adult child of alcoholic, the whole reason it's called that is because we're still, as adults, behaving the way we did when we were children and using the tools that worked for us. Whether it was like performing for everyone, shape-shifting for everyone, it's sort of if you had alcoholism in your home or you had any kind of neurodivergence or borderline personality, which I think just very recently we even have any understanding of in the zeitgeist, and it's all still pretty murky, or schizophrenia or compulsive behaviors, you adapted. That's the wonderful thing about us, is we can adapt so quickly, and then I know how to keep everything we say at 70 degrees. So do you need anything? Just to make sure everyone's...
Right. The problem is that adaptation gets calcified. And when your environment changes, your adaptations don't change with it.
Unless
you continue to go back to those same strategies that you learned as a young person just to survive and get through the day. And now they show up as very unhealthy behavior patterns that are ruining your life.
And what programs do is they take your brain off of auto drive. It takes it off your default software. So we go, oh, this is my default software. I'm going to update it, and so that I'm not operating on that same software. If that gets murky, it'll always default to that software. It'll always default to those thoughts, that blueprint. If I'm hungry, angry, lonely, tired, if I've skipped some meetings, if I've skipped, doing any of my rituals that keep me clear, if I've skipped hanging out with my friends that think like this, like I'm going to start getting further and further away from that 2.0, and I'm going to start defaulting, if I'm scared, if I'm in a high stress situation. So like, I got to know that about myself. But what program does do for us is it gives us pause. I didn't know I had no idea what that meant. I was I know we're not allowed to say spaz, but I was such a manic person that was just always in a rush because I had overbooked myself, overcommitted to stuff. Busyness was kind of an addiction of mine, not necessarily productivity, but just busyness. It was a way of being avoidant. It's a way of not having to be with my feelings and keep that victim mentality of like, people want so much from me and I just, that martyr complex, which by the way, so one of the first questions I ask sponsees and Al-Anon is I say, okay, if you're going to the Rich Roll podcast, if it takes 30 minutes to get to Rich Roll and you have to be there at 3:00, what time do you leave? Takes 30 minutes.
What is the healthy response, or what do your sponsees say?
What are the sponsees' responses? Usually, if they're just coming in a program, like you leave at 3:30. Because it takes 30 minutes to get there.
Right. But then you show, if anything intervenes, you're late.
Magical thinking.
Yeah.
What if you run into someone you know? What if there's traffic? What if you stop and pee? What if you have, getting out of the car? You can't find the building. Like, you're not setting yourself up for a positive result.
Sure.
You're not
But
giving yourself cushion.
The more typical, they may say that, but then they'll still leave at 2:45 because there's a self-sabotage aspect of it. Like, even if they're not consciously aware that they're running late, they'll set themselves up so that they end up leaving late. And then that's a way to flog yourself or to create stress on the way there so you can tell yourself you're a piece of shit or get the rush of hormones that come with, like, I gotta get, like.
With making sure no one respects you.
Yeah.
Right, you know what I mean? Because it's also like why, so to me, that is a form of insanity and a form of exactly making sure that you feel like shit later, to, be an engine to your shame addiction, and you're bringing other people into it, which is especially, disrespectful. But, I think that that's something that, for me is a big one. It's a very small thing. A lot of these big problems, I think, have really basic solutions. I have anxiety all day. Okay, try just for a week scheduling out your day in a way that gives you an hour between each thing. If it takes 30 minutes, and then just see what happens. See.
But for the unhealthy person, it's like, but whatever. Like, I need the complicated solution because I'm special and my problems are special.
I know,
and you don't understand how terrible it is for me.
Yeah, I know. Look, I get it. Yeah. So you know what? Never mind then. You know what? I'm so sorry. Never mind. Yeah. You're good. I think you're good. And look, I went away. The first year of Al-Anon and ACA, I used it. I weaponized it. I mean, because I went in and I get exactly what this is. I'm too busy for this. I don't have to do the steps. I got it. I just,
right. The intellectualization of it. I did that too. And then I just had to relapse a ton of times and end up in a treatment center.
Yep. That'll do it.
That's where intelligence gets in the way.
Sometimes a little bit of program can be horrible for you because you can use it, to hover up. Well, I'm in this program, so obviously I'm right. I mean, well, what they would say to do is this, and this is obviously, you're like, I'm not going to go to.
That's called being a tourist in the program. Because you're not actually doing it.
I'm not going to go to the problem for the solution, and you're the problem, so I'm going to go get a solution. Like, you can't, doing all that is you're just using it to bully and shame other people, and it just makes your self-righteous indignation addiction even worse.
Did you answer the question that I asked you about what's showing up for you right now?
No, because I realize I owe you a couple answers. How is it showing up for me currently still with the whack-a-mole of all of this? I do also think it's really important to update your software on yourself and on your recovery of going like, oh yeah, I really needed this 10 years ago when I was in recovery, but now I don't know if I need that as much anymore. I think I need to be doing more of this. And also to go, recheck in, because that arrogance stuff the ego will come right back up. I remember during the pandemic, I did a couple Zoom meetings and, I'm like, I've been doing this for so long and I'm listening to people who are just in the problem, not in the solution, which to me comes off like complaining, but they're newcomers, so, my work right now is to be more patient with people the way they were with me when I just came in and I had no idea what I was doing. And I thought it was cool to just brag about how bad my childhood was.
Right. Or to approach the meeting from a perspective of how you can help these people as opposed to what am I extracting from this that's helpful to me?
100%. Yeah. Or I'm just here to look them in the eyes and receive what they're saying. God forbid me not think about myself for 3 minutes. Like, take the win, the respite from having to think about yourself, But when that's what I love about hearing other people share and just being like, okay, it's not just me. Oh, I'm not more special than anyone. Oh, it's not harder for me than it is for everyone. I'm just a worker bee. But when judgment comes in, that's when I know I'm getting a little rusty. When gossip comes in, especially at a time where there's just so much gossip, gossip is a really big sort of no bottom line for a lot of Al-Anons, because it's sort of how we feel self-righteous. It's how we judge. It's how we deal with fear. It's how we give ourselves a little superficial hit of self-esteem just because someone else made a mistake. That's not real self-esteem, you know? So it's like the McDonald's version of getting a little hit of self-esteem. Gossip is a big one. And then the way I handle gossip when it comes up, when someone's like, oh my God, did you hear the Johnny Depp and the Amber Heard thing? And I'm like, you know what? I would love to participate in this conversation. I just can't because it's a
But how does that work as a podcast host in the comedy kind of ecosystem? Because that's sort of part of it. Like you guys go on each other's shows and you kind of talk about each other. And part of the comedy derives from like whether it's, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard or whatever's going on in the news.
Right. Well, my podcast is really kind of just focused on me writing jokes about stuff and having, incredible people on, but I tend to try to go personal. I don't want to ever take cheap shots at anybody. I don't we end up cutting any of that out if someone will like gossip about a celebrity or something. You have to bring it back to yourself. So Britney Spears, her conservatorship's over and she was barefoot in a thing. We're not going to go, oh, she's a trash hillbilly, whatever, and go like, I did that a lot as a kid. Should I be worried about hookworm? Take it back to yourself. Keep the focus on yourself. That's the sort of Al-Anon adage. So for me, there's definitely been some things that I'm like, I need to sleep on it. If you had trauma as a child,
好，这场直
a rule
播
that
就
works
到
for
这
me
里结
is
束了。有喜
that
欢的左上角关注一下，
anytime you
没
want to
有
make a
进粉丝群
decision,
的进粉丝
wait 3 days and then see if that's still the decision you want to make because
Always a good rule.
feelings aren't facts.
好，谢谢大家，
and
晚一点会
I
再
might
播
be
一场，
having a
然后就
histrionic
今天的直播
reaction. Like wanting to get those likes because I know this will go viral and I'm exploiting someone else. So I'm a big